And welcome to Colors of the Dark. I'm your co-host, Rebekah McKendry, and with me is Elric Kane. I feel like we did this episode
This
already.
episode's
Do you
called
feel that?
Take Two.
Take
We
two.
were gonna launch our year 2 weeks ago, and we did, and the episode was fine. A computer malfunction, Y2K they call it, eliminated the entire episode. But we have decided we took a couple weeks to kind of redo and be enthused. You were ready to go the next day, and I was like, I need
I
some time. I need to
no.
process my feelings.
You got to
Um,
learn acting
I'm not
skills.
an
You can
actor.
do
I
the
don't want to be
same
an
thing
actor.
again.
No.
And Elric's like, no, it's not
Has to be
fresh. It's not
authentic. It has to be
organic.
authentic. I had to and actually this one's better because there's now a couple extra things as well as the same stuff, including our same guest coming back because we obviously felt most bad for that, but it was super fun.
Well, plus he's a friend,
He
and
is a
we can
friend.
be like, dude, here's what happened. Just join us
And he
again.
made the
And
absolutely
yeah,
kick-ass new Shudder film called Destroy All Neighbors, which we both really dug, and it's super
yeah.
unique and completely a Josh Forbes movie. So listen into the latter half today to hear.
But first, we will be digging into what we've seen recently. But before we get to the interview with Josh, we are also going to count down 5 things each that we are looking forward to in 2024.
Did yours change?
This was
2 weeks? No, neither did mine. I left mine.
It did not.
I was tempted to be like, fuck one of these things because it's 2 weeks later and I've changed.
I have an addition, but I'll call it an honorable mention.
Okay.
But I did add to some of the things that I've seen because let's kick off with this True Detective.
Oh, I put that at the top too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well, I will start by saying, because it'll come up later, that I watched a lot of stuff because right after Christmas, a relative brought me COVID right at Christmas time. Okay. And so it was my first, thank you. Yeah, it was my first, somehow I skirted COVID for like 3 fucking years and then smacked. And so I did Paxlovid, which was great because the first initial punch of COVID lasted like 48 hours max. And then I was testing negative and I was like, this is amazing. What is the hype about this? Like I was in and out in 48 hours. And then literally 8 days later, I got smacked with this rebound and I was down for another 10. And so
but in that interim, you got to see one movie with me, and I did not
get COVID, so
that was good.
No, because I was negative for like 8 days. I was totally negative. I went to a couple kids' birthday parties. Like it was a wild thing. But in that interim, we did go see a movie. But first, let's kick off with True Detective. So,
yes,
because that's what I've been watching most recently. The really cool thing about this particular season is that it is a horror showrunner. This is Issa Lopez, who we've had on, I think she was on Shockwaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we had her on twice on Shockwaves, possibly.
I think I've only met her once. Tigers Are Not Afraid, I believe is once, and she was a fantastic guest.
She's awesome.
Such a bright filmmaker and just sharp and funny. And I guess she had also written a lot of comedy and mm-hmm. In Mexico TV and things like that. But this is totally unique because it's not just she's a horror showrunner, it's a horror season. And like when you get something like that, you're not expecting True Detective to go full horror, and that was super cool.
So that has been a really controversial thing as I've been reading reviews online, is that usually True Detective, it may feel like there's supernatural elements. Like I feel like
only the first season. Yeah, the other two are very
the Yellow King, it's got these kind of supernatural overtones, but at the end of the day, everything is grounded in reality. This season, we are already getting that nothing is grounded in reality. It feels very cosmic.
But I will say that's the wording is important there. It feels incredibly grounded because the drama is so grounded and so fair and so realistic. The sex scenes are super real. The character types are real. So it's like making that. It reminds me a bit of a Fessenden vibe because he's so good at grounding that stuff before then adding the supernatural layers mm-hmm. to it. So I think that still feels like True Detective to me. It's just making clear that this isn't going to be just a killer orchestrating thing.
True crime show.
There's obviously something bigger going on.
And what I've really been loving is that it is hitting at it so subtly. That you understand from the very first episode that there is some type of bigger cosmic otherworldly horror at play, but it is not hitting it hard. It is just weaving it in and giving you tiny little tastes of it each episode so far, so that it can spend the time focusing on the drama aspect of it and really nailing those characters. I'm waiting for the 3rd episode to hit.
It's the most I've felt the whole once a week thing. Like usually I'm
Yeah.
like, I think TV should go back to just being once a week. I hate when they dump all the episodes. And then this one, after first episode, I'm like, you have to at least give me 3 because
I
otherwise
would
I'm in
binge
pain.
the fuck
Yeah,
out of
I'm in
this,
pain.
Max.
But I
Come
do think
on.
they're right not to put them all because then you're only hot for a second, right? Like if you, but I
Yeah.
do think you could have done 2 or 3 to get people started because it is very. I'm so hooked in terms of needing to know the little details. But you know, talking about the horror being subtle at times, but there's a couple. There's this something that happens in the second one with something that's frozen that's so like intense. And then I saw an interview with her and it was such a great reference. She was talking about because it's exactly copied from Dead and Buried
Oh
and she
yeah.
was like, I loved that movie when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So she's definitely, you know, pulling the good stuff. And and when people complain, it's like
So
we already have the other 3 seasons of a show. There'll
yeah.
be another True Detective someday that's not supernatural. Let us enjoy
And
this horror of it, you know?
and some of those seasons I found too grounded in reality. Like I think it was the
The third's pretty
third
dry.
season,
It's
the
Steve
third one
Northstead.
that was it was focused on the city of industry here in
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles. Is that the right one? I think that was the right
Could be
one.
the second
Where
one.
it was very much about like kind of the city of industry, political and governmental control,
It might have
and it
been
was
two.
really
Yeah.
dry. I just
Yeah,
couldn't
and
do it.
I
It's
like that stuff too. I you know I can get into anything, and True Detective as a brand I really dig, but I also just I hate it when people get so protective of. And this one does have, you know, it says Night Country. It is slightly distinct. When people then on Twitter say things like, "How you know why didn't they just call it Night Country? Not have?" It's like so people would watch it. Like you
yeah,
put True
it's an
Detective, and people
IP.
are gonna turn it on. That's why.
It's
Yeah.
totally an IP. And I get why they are doing the week to week thing because the hype from the first episode almost doubled the viewership on the second.
Yeah.
And if you had just dumped, and it will continue growing. Like that's what I think that a lot of the binge shows are missing marketing
Yeah.
wise. Like it's cool that I can sit down and watch every episode of Stranger Things like back to back. But like when we look back at something like Lost, like it was this growing snowball of hype so that by the time you got to the end of the first season everybody was watching it because it had just become this massive thing and it started out as like 10 people being like oh my god this was wild and then it just blossomed into something
It
massive.
especially is it is especially true to mysteries and Twin Peaks,
Mm-hmm.
the original and the Return,
Oh yeah.
both proved that. Like no one would be talking about the Return if it was all dumped at once. People would have been
Yeah.
frustrated. Instead, it became a talking point. I think the best recent example that reminds me of this is The Outsider. That show was so
Oh
important to like have to
yeah.
sit with for a week and like
Mm-hmm.
crave knowing things. But so you know, it's cool that these models still work. But I'm very excited to see where it goes. And I also really like
Yeah,
Jodie Foster's casting. I think she's a really interesting
she's
character,
great.
and she hasn't really had
Yeah.
something to do that quite as meaty as that for a while. So,
Plus, it's got huskies in it. I have a husky.
husky.
So yeah, every single time one appears on screen, I'm like, huskies. Okay, so while I was COVID negative for a whole 8 days in between my two bouts, we went to see Night Swim
Which
by
was brand new when we recorded this 2 weeks ago, and now it
I
feels
know
like a
it
movie
had
that's
just come
dead
out.
and gone, dead and buried.
Yeah, so we were both kind of mixed on this walking out of the theater. We both kind of felt and I don't want to speak for you because this was a month ago that we saw it, but I think I remember you feeling the same way I did where the first part of the movie as it's setting everything up and it's setting up the mythology, you're like, "Oh shit, this is kind of cool. I'm in. There's some really good scares there." And then they just kind of drop it all and then it just turns into creepy dad in a
And they try to
house
do
and
too
that
much with there's sequences
yeah
and like you know Carrie Condon's mom's great. Wyatt Russell's okay, even though I usually love him. In this, like maybe it's a little harder to love him when he has to play this kind of a character. But when it sets up when you have your pool gags and it's just like weird fleshy guy with strange eyes behind you in the pool, that's terrifying. When you then have that times 1,000 of them, it's suddenly not that scary because it's more like a
yeah
weird afterlife thing. And that's just not as scary as when there's one weird thing standing outside the pool looking at you. Like, so it had both, but the more it added, the less I think it worked as the movie went.
and I was super into the mythology that they were building about how it
Right.
used to be the spring and there's something in the water and they never really did anything with it. It just kind of, here it is in the first act. I'm laying it all out. It's in the cool hook, right? And then it just fell. And then it became zombies in a pool.
And we
And
felt the air go like it's you don't always notice this in screens, but this was a packed house. It was the first day it opened.
it
We
was opening
noticed
night. It was
Yeah, we
packed.
noticed the change in the second. You could kind of feel the air in the room change, and it just was very different than the start. And so, yeah, I think this one again, telling that it's not being released in the middle of summer because this is like a complete summer movie about swimming. That everyone should be watching this movie, and then the next day going, "Oh, I don't want to swim," and instead it's
That was
coming
the
out in
weirdest
winter,
thing.
which feels like a dump. You know?
They have a 4th of July party
Yeah.
in the middle of the movie. And yeah, but it came out in
So
January.
maybe stream it in
I
middle of the year.
I
It's still
guess I think Blumhouse was trying to hit that was
Megan.
the
It was the
exact
Megan
same
day. Yeah.
weekend that they did
Yeah.
Megan. So yeah, I think they were trying to hit the Megan
No,
week.
and I get that, and sometimes movies come out when they come out, but I did feel like this felt like such a summer vibe thing that could have. But anyway, it's definitely decent. It's totally watchable, but it's a little too much Insidious too, with the crazy dad stuff that it took away from what could have been maybe something a little more unique.
Yeah.
That was nicer.
100%.
I have one that's not a full review. I'll just give it a plug because I really want you to see it, and that is Poor Things has finally gone wide. It's been very limited, and so I'd spent a long time wanting to see the new Yorgos Lanthimos, who obviously dabbles in horror with Killing of a Sacred Deer. But this movie is because it's out now. I really want horror folk to see it because it's like a really insane sexual comedy that happens to be Bride of Frankenstein mixed with Frankenhooker mixed with Barbie. Honestly, I thought Barbie was really good, but this is a better movie, and it's the exact same story. I mean, it's about a woman having basically coming to full sexual and thinking autonomy by the end of the movie, and so it's so similar to Barbie. It's hard for me not to see them come out in the same year and go, yeah, but this one's so fun because it's so insane. It's really wild. It's a truly wild, funny, strange movie, and the Bride of Frankenstein of it means I think horror fans, even though it's not really horror, it has enough there that gothic kind of sensibilities, people might really dig it. So very fun, strange movie.
I am very excited to see this
one.
I
think
I've
you will
this
dig
on
this.
my list,
yeah.
So I'm excited for it to get to streaming so I can watch it. Okay, I wanted to include a couple of Giallo picks because it's January Giallo, and we were going to do more of this last episode before a Black Club computer killed it. So yeah, I wanted to at least include a couple of them. So I just rewind. I'm not going to say much about it. I just rewatched New York Ripper, and I don't think I have seen New York Ripper in 20 years.
Quack.
Like I was probably in high school watching this. And so I had very little memory. I know it's Fulci, so therefore it's gory and it's kind of over the top. I did not remember how fucking ugly this film is.
It's the nastiest of nasty movies, I think.
It is so nasty. It is just a constant amount of weird sex followed by visceral death scenes. So yeah, it was definitely one of the more brutal Giallo films. Elric's about to sneeze. Don't sneeze. Oh, he muted himself, so you can't even hear him sneezing. I just
You blew it.
Narrated.
You blew my I was
I
trying
narrated
to be like
the
a good
whole
podcaster
sneeze.
and
Oh gosh. But yeah, the New York Ripper, this is on it's a tight giallo. I was still interested the whole way, but every single one of the death scenes, I was like, oh, and
it's a great 42nd Street movie. Like it's a great throwback to that feeling of the sleazy New York that doesn't exist now,
Plus, he's filming in all of these 42nd Street peep shows and walking down the street. Like, it was this beautiful historical piece about 42nd Street in 1970 something, whenever this was made. And so it was so fascinating in this capacity. And I've gotten really fascinating with the giallos that were shot in New York City. And even just some of the Italian films of that time period, like the Manhattan Babies and things like that. So just seeing, how Fulci was shooting this, it's still dubbed. That was the wildest thing that I didn't remember is going in. I was like, well, it's in New York, right? They wouldn't need to dub. Nope, still completely dubbed. So,
I guess it's going to all markets. Yeah, so they probably dub it in every language. Yeah.
All the fun trappings of a standard giallo. So I have the Blu-ray from Blue Underground, but I noticed it's also streaming on Tubi. And the other brand new giallo that I watched, I included a bunch of deep cuts on our other show, but I wanted to mention No One Heard the Scream just because I really enjoyed this movie. This, and fine, internet, you can argue to your heart's content. This came out from Severin, and I considered it to be a giallo, and Severin called it a Spanish giallo. There are such things as Spanish giallos. And as soon as I posted it up on my socials as part of Giallo January, I got all of these. You know, that's not actually a Giallo. So fine, internet, have at it. This has all the trappings of Giallo, and there were Spanish Giallos coming out around this time period. So I'm going to kind of chunk it in with that category just because it really does feel like one. No one heard the scream. This is out from Severin, and then it's also currently streaming on Tubi as well. 1973, directed by Eloy D. Iglesia, who mostly made exploitation films, kinky films, which were spelled Q-U-I-Q-U-I. Not kinky as in the sexy kinky. These are like juvenile delinquent films about youth gone wild. And then he also made Cannibal Man,
I've heard of it. I haven't
which
seen
is a
it,
trip.
yeah.
You know, it's a cannibal movie. It's one of the Italian, you know, it's in the vein of the Italian cannibals, but Spanish cannibal. So yeah,
think,
this
don't they
one,
call them paella? Well, not giallos, but when they talk about the westerns, they always call them paella westerns instead of spaghetti.
Westerns,
Which I love that
yep.
the difference. It's pretty cool.
It's just all kind of Euro trash. Yeah. So that's where I would put this. It's a Euro trash Giallo film. It is a very fashionable, wealthy woman who's clearly kind of an entrepreneur. She lives by herself. She breaks up with her boyfriend right at the top of the movie, and she's in this beautiful apartment, dumps her boyfriend who was expecting her that weekend. So you establish early on that no one is expecting her. No one cares where she is, and she was supposed to be out of town this weekend. So everybody thinks she's out of town except for the boyfriend who now thinks she's not coming. And with that, she witnesses her neighbor throwing his wife's dead body down an elevator chute. And you get that there's like all of these different malfunctions happening in the building and that nobody even is in this apartment building. They're basically the only two apartments left. And so he immediately breaks into her apartment. She runs back into her apartment and tries to lock everything up. He basically takes her hostage and then involves her in this really elaborate plot to get rid of his wife's body. And the whole time, like, twists are being uncovered. This was fun. I really had a good time with this one. So I wanted to mention it here. Just because for our Giallo completionists out there, or even just people who really like these kind of murder thrillers from the 1970s, this was a trip. And I had heard nothing about this up to this point. That is, No One Heard the Scream 1973, Blu-ray out from Severin, and it's also playing on Tubi right now.
And I think we took about 5 pretty lesser known Giallos on our most recent Patreon deep cut. So if you go subscribe to that, you'll be able to hear those, because, you know, and I think we'll probably continue through the year filling in some of those gaps. So one I talked about a couple weeks ago that was new, and it's kind of good to know that it still hasn't really been talked about much. So I'm curious to put this on people's radar. From New Zealand, which doesn't happen that often anymore with horror films that come out. This is called Loop Track by director Thomas Sainsbury, who's also the star of the film. And it's kind of about a schlubby loser guy who's trying to get away to the most remote place, does not want to be around people. It's intimated, maybe there's a divorce, maybe you don't really know, but just as a very kind of meek character, doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to see people, goes in the bush, what we call a loop track, which is just a trail that's going to come back in a loop over like 4 days or 2 hours, whatever it is.
We call them circle trails.
Yeah,
but yeah.
There it's called Loop Track. So when I first saw the title, I didn't remember that, and I was like, "Oh, is this like going to be a loop story, like a like one of those time loop things?"
I do love time loops.
Yeah, it isn't. But even as I was watching, I was expecting that. So he's out on this trail. He's clearly not someone who's meant for the bush. He's like an office-looking kind of guy, and he sees somebody up ahead, and he purposely tries to avoid them on the trail. And then there's these little houses along the trail where you can pitch for the night. You know, kind of like a glamping, a version of a glamping,
like hostels.
Yeah, but in the bush. So there's like it's a space anyone can use it. No one's actually living there. There's you're not paying money or anything. And he ends up having to run into other people. And one's like an obnoxious guy who wants to be his buddy, and he's super positive and super nice. And so you're suddenly like, is that guy a serial killer? And all these different things go through your mind as you watch this. And as the story goes, he sees a dark thing in the darkness, like a dark shape that looks almost like a figure of some kind, but no one else seems to see it, and he starts talking about a lot and seeming a little crazy. And about exactly on the halfway part, I could see a lot of people turning this movie off right at the halfway mark, and I wouldn't have turned it off, but I was definitely on the cusp of like, do I need to watch another he's a crazy guy who's going to do bad things and it's all in his head? It kind of is pulling you into that feeling with these people in this remote setting, and then then something bad happens to a couple of them. So of course they're like a couple of the people on this that you meet, and suddenly you're like, oh, he must be killing them, and then pretending it's something else. And then about just past the halfway point, and don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's important for you to watch this movie. it reveals something. And once it commits to it, it's a massive reveal. It's like swing huge. And I laughed out loud, gasped, laughed. Hadn't ever seen this before done. Not quite like this. And so I'm not going to ruin what it is, but I am just telling you so as you know that this is a movie that builds in a way that might be, if you stick with it, you might actually find satisfying. It won't just be it's all in their head kind of movie, which, is fine too, but we've had a lot of those.
Oh, yeah.
So I think somebody like you might get a kick out of where this goes. I'll tell you off mic what that thing is because it is quite
okay.
It won't spoil it for you. I just don't want to spoil it for everyone. But it was a fun movie, and it was like $4 on a couple weeks ago. It was $4 on Amazon Loop Track. So it was a new release. Now it might. I'm not sure. Maybe isn't a new release anymore. We'll see. But I do think people might kind of dig that.
Okay. I'm going to talk about one that was from 2023 that I am just now catching up with. So I was at, I'm a big patron of the Burbank Public Library. And I was in there a couple of days ago and I'm walking past an end cap and it said like, best films of 2023. And some of the staff had picked their faves and somebody had put The Blackening on there. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm sold. I checked out The Blackening Blu-ray from my public library, took it home. This was awesome. Honestly, possibly even would have made my top 10 had I watched it back in 2023. Now, when I had seen this trailer, I was hesitant to see it because I thought it was spoofy. Like I could tell from the trailer that it was self-aware and comedic. And so I was honestly thinking that it was kind of spoofy or even making fun of horror films in kind of like a not another teen movie type manner. And so I was thinking that that's what I was going in for. It is not by any like it is just not even close to that. It is self-aware in what it's doing and it is funny, but it's not spoofy by any stretch. And so the setup is that a group of friends from college who haven't seen each other in a really long time, you get that they all kind of have their different beef with each other. There's a lot of drama between some of them. Some of them have hooked up in the past. Some of them are hooking up now and don't want to tell other people in the group. But they're all friends from college. They get an Airbnb and they gather there for a Juneteenth celebration. And when they get to the cabin, they find this game, this like horribly racist board game in this back room. And they're like, I'm going to play this because we're going to get this person canceled. So they want to put it up online. So they're ready to record the whole thing as they play this horribly racist game and show it off. And then the game kind of comes to life and starts threatening to kill them and doing all these things. People start dying. They start fighting back against whatever force is controlling this. It was great. It was such a fun time. And it does have that really self-aware element to it, but it was so cleverly woven into the humor and the actual real events that were happening that it wasn't as over the top self-aware as I was expecting it to be. So yeah, if you have not seen this yet from 2023, it was great. I had fun with this. The Blackening.
Yeah, I stayed away for the same reason because just in my head it was probably saying, "Oh, it's going to be a satire like Scary Movie or something." But that's good to hear.
Yeah, it was really fun.
One that I saw a couple weeks ago, so it's kind of faded, but that I thought you might dig, and I think people who like 30 Coins, the show, would dig it. I talked about it being like a very much an Alex D. Iglesias vibe, and probably as someone who even knows him, it's Spanish horror film, brand new film called Everyone Will Burn, and this is set in a small, very beautifully shot film, set in a small Spanish village, and it opens with a woman who is standing on the bridge just in her normal kind of work clothes and looks like she's about to jump. We will come to learn that she had a son who was kind of bullied and committed suicide. So, and it makes sense why she feels so broken. And then this little girl who's covered in dirt comes up to her and says, "Mama," and like kind of talks her down, and she goes off with her, and they're stopped by cops. And the cops are like, "Who is this dirty girl?" And the girl lights the cops completely on fire and they die. And so the woman takes her home and is like, I better figure out what this is. And in this town, there is this legend of a girl who would appear, a small girl at some point, something to do with the apocalypse. That's why it's a very much Alex D. Iglesias kind of vibe. And what starts happening is all the sinners of this town, which is the entire town, all start getting their comeuppance because of whatever's been unlocked between even though it feels like she's basically Damien Thorne, So they kind of feel like they're the bad guys, but it's also by the end you're kind of like, yeah, but everyone in the town sucks. They're all pious and full of shit, and it's it's really fun. I think if you like those kind of Spanish movies, if you like Almodovar, though, it just has a little bit of that flair, and I thought it was really well made. It built to somewhere that was pretty chaotic and those kind of apocalyptic storylines where everything's burning around you. Yeah, it was a nice surprise. I knew nothing about it when I turned this one on, so that's everyone.
This one, it hasn't gotten a lot of reviews, but the ones that I've seen have been really good. So I don't think it's gotten a lot of coverage, but again, the coverage I've seen has been really positive on it.
You would dig it. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you one bonkers fucking movie that I was tempted to put over on Deep Cuts, but I decided to include it here because I haven't covered Junji Ito stuff for a really long time. And for a stretch, I was reading like an Ito book every week. So while we were at the LA Haunted Hayride, this was you and I had gone to the LA Haunted Hayride. We ate like way too many funnel cakes. We ran into the Ghoul Daddies. I know. Us eat too many funnel cakes. It's wild. We also had roasted corn.
Oh yeah.
I think it was the roasted corn that did it because we did that after the funnel cake. It was we ate a lot. Anyway, so as we were sitting on a bale of hay stuffing ourselves full of funnel cakes, we ran into Matthew and Paul, who go on socials under the name the Ghoul Daddies. And awesome guys. And they had recommended, I think it was them. I know that we got this recommendation on that night, so I think it was them. They had recommended a film to me called Tomio from 2011. And the hook was, it's the only film that Junji Ito ever directed. And suddenly I was like, wait, what? Junji Ito directed a film? Fuck, I'm in. And it's based off one of his early stories. And I can't remember the name right now of what it was. It was like the Yellow Turtleneck or something like that. Nothing to do with Tomi. That is an entirely different story. This is Tomio. And so, yeah, this is the one thing that Junji Ito directed. I will say before you watch this, Junji Ito is a much better writer and artist than he is a director. So don't go in expecting it to be the most brilliant thing that you've ever seen. But that said, it was really creepy and there was something cool about it. And it is still very much a Junji Ito story and vibe to it. So if that is your thing where it's all about the body horror and the weirdness of it, this may be your vibe as well. So this is about a young couple, Tomio and Madoka, and they decide that they are going to get married right after graduate school. And Madoka convinces Tomio to come with her to this fortune teller. And they get to the fortune teller, and you can tell that the fortune teller is like totally hot for Tomio. And the fortune teller predicts that they're going to break up horribly and that it's going to end tragically. And literally that night, Tomio goes back to the fortune teller and starts having wild and crazy sex with her. And so immediately you're like, okay, relationship fell apart and the fortune teller's doing this. But the fortune teller has this thing about heads. She keeps talking about how she just wants to keep his head and she thinks his head is so beautiful. And when he scorns her, his head, he claims, you don't know, he shows up at a doctor's office and he claims that his head is no longer attached and he has to hold it in place. So he's literally holding his ears, trying to keep his head in place. And the doctors are like, you're crazy. This can't be the case. And then they x-ray him and they find out that no, his head is truly completely severed and he is holding it in place. And this is now a curse that his head is no longer attached. If he lets go, it's going to fall off and he's going to die. So he has to hold it in place. This gets so fucking weird. So weird. So this, I found this on Amazon. And it's a weird rental because I'm fairly sure that this was part of either some larger television anthology because it had two sets of opening credits. It had one set that seemed to be introducing kind of an anthology or a TV show, and then it had the opening credits for this individual segment. So it might be part of something bigger. I don't know. The cool thing is it's Junji Ito directed, and it is a true Junji Ito vibe. And even if you're like, I don't know, this feels a little low budget, it's still a total Junji Ito vibe with terrifying moments and just weirdness. I at least wanted to give this a really strong mention because I know there's some Ito fans out there.
Speaking of fans, lift your shirt just a little bit to see the bottom name. Bottom name. Okay. If you're at home, her shirt says Bava, Fulci, Suavi, and Argento. Coming next Friday, not this Friday, 1 week from today, a brand new Shudder documentary called Dario Argento Panico. And I had heard about this, and I had no clue if I was going to get to see it, but suddenly I got an email, like I think it was yesterday morning, saying, anyone, if your people are interested in covering this thing. I wrote back straight away because I had like a 2 hour window, and I said, if I get this right now, I will watch it right now. And they sent it to me right away. But they also said, but it's embargoed till next week. And I was like, we do shows every 2 weeks. If I like this movie, can I talk about it? And they said, yes. Here I am talking about it because I loved it.
Busting embargo.
Yeah, I'm busting embargo because I even told them I'd bust it. But I think embargo's till Monday. But they said, hey, I said, hey, if I love it, can I talk about it? Here's the thing, and this is interesting. This is directed by Simone Scafidi. I heard about this maybe a few months ago that it was coming out. It's played at festivals, so I think there'll be some people. What people might bump against is also what I think makes it really great. It's a portrait of Dario Argento now. So one thing I didn't know about him is he writes everything he's ever written. He checks into a hotel, doesn't matter which hotel, something isolated, and stays there the entire time to write it by himself. So that's what he's done his whole career. It's how he gets a feel for it, how he gets creeped out, how he did. And so again, something I wouldn't have known about him. So the movie shoots a lot of him now checking in at Dario at 80, checking into a hotel to write something new. And so it's like,
does he write it like in like a week, or is
no, he's there for a while? I think
screenplays take like 6 weeks.
No, I think he's there.
Yeah,
I don't. They didn't say, but I think that's the idea. I think the idea is he's just off the radar for a while. And I don't know if this is him writing. They don't really say what he's writing. It could have been when he was writing the new one, Dark Glasses, but I know he's meant to make a new film in the next year if that's still on the books, so it could have been that. But the point is, there's stuff in it that some people watching would be like, well, that's a waste of time because it's like him arriving at a hotel. But the process of it is super interesting, and seeing this guy, and you get everything. You get Dario now, looking back at his life, talking about things, which I always love those kind of documentaries. Like De Palma is one of my favorite documentaries from a few years ago. And then you also get Gaspar Noé. It's not a ton of people, but you get Gaspar Noé, Nicholas Refn, Guillermo del Toro, as are the three big kind of contemporary directors who go back and talk about why they're just so impressed with him, what he did, and how he changed how they saw movies. Then you get his collaborators, Michele Soavi, Claudio Simonetti, and all talking about his work. But what really makes this a unique documentary, and I think I just really appreciated it now because I already know a lot about him, and he's one of the top 2 or 3 directors of my whole love.
Mine too.
It's about family. It's really a lot of stuff with Fiore Argentino, is one of his daughters, Asia Argento, one of his ex-wives talking. His sister is interviewed a lot, and so you realize this is such a family person. I mean, there's just one part which really surprised me that because Dario Nicolidi and him have had a pretty, pretty tumultuous, like a good relationship at the start.
Yeah,
it went bad.
I don't think Dario Argento would immediately think family man.
No, and that's and it's fascinating. At a point, it turned out to be the opposite. That his daughters chose at a certain point to live with him and not Dario Nicolidi because he was so much better, so much more grounded, and so much better at being a normal family dad. And I'm watching it going, well, that's fascinating. Like I did not know this about him. And you hear them talking about it. They love their mom, but they're like it was kind of hard to crazier lifestyle and stuff. So there's all this, and you realize his dad. It actually really explains, because a lot of people, you look over his work and you go, okay, post Tenebrae it changes a bit, and Opera might be the last really great one, but then there's still good stuff. They address that. They talk about how he talks about how he changes. He talks about how Italian TV really changes the culture in Italy and the kind of movies that could get made. But the big one is his dad dies after Tenebrae, and his dad produced every single film he made. His dad was his number one guy, Salvatore Argento. And so there's stuff about his mom as a photographer. It's just, some people will be like, oh, but I want it to just be clips of the movies. And it's like, yeah, that's not this movie. It has a lot of that. And there's some great clips about him. And it walks its way kind of through. But for a 90-minute film, it really packs in family, artistic vision. And it's not all a puff piece. Like there's moments where Asia's like, talks about some of the difficulties of a relationship like theirs, but also the beauty of it. I just loved it. I thought it was it's what I'm looking for in these kind of docs. For those who want that other version, there's already a film out there called Dario Argento and I for Horror from 2000 that was like, the early, just the punks, lots of. I love that film too. That was like one of those things I needed to own when I was young. But as a companion to see this, and especially because he was just the star of Gaspar Noé's new film, and Noé even talks about why he cast him. He's like, he's just a total actor. You always watch him. I'd watch him and do Q&As for an hour and be like, this guy should be acting. And it's, I don't know, I loved it. I'm so happy that there's gonna, that he's getting his real deserves, because he's not just a horror director. He's like, in terms of like visual artists, like you could stack him up in like of visual artists who are film directors, like in a echelon maybe of 10 contemporary directors with the De Palmas
Oh
and
yeah.
people like that. So it's just that he happened to make all his films in horror, right? So it's he's just a very interesting figure, but super cool, really excited for people. I know, people are always mixed on these things. They want it to be a certain way, but I think the fact that it's showing you something what we don't already know about him is the point of documentaries a lot of times. So that's going to be out next Friday. Dario Argento, Panico.
Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna round us out by running down a list of graphic novels that I read during the holiday, because I haven't covered graphic novels in a while. And my goal, I will say, for this year is to cover at least one graphic novel and one regular novel on every
Did you
show.
see my Goodreads? I've read three
I did.
novels.
Elric has
In
read three
January.
novels,
I
y'all, and
watched
he
50
didn't.
movies and three novels. I didn't want to watch 50 movies, but I did. Three novels. But it's also because my work hasn't really picked up yet. Work's about to pick up. So, they're Japanese. I've been digging into them. I'll talk about them somewhere else because I want
Yeah,
you to.
so you've been following me on Goodreads. You can now find Elric there as well, because that was his big incentive from December. Is he was like, I can only read books if there's like a letterbox for books. And I was like, there
Yeah, she
is.
turned me onto it.
So,
I haven't really started following people yet, but because it's just to hold myself accountable. But what I will say, I was going to tweet this, but it's actually causing me real anxiety. You get used to Letterboxd, then you go to Goodreads, they don't do half stars, and it's killing me because I read a book that I'm like, 3 stars is too low, but I can't give it 4 because it's not a. And I was like, oh my god, what do I do? And I gave it 3, and I felt kind of bad because it was good, but it wasn't like. Oh, I'm a half-star guy. I love giving half stars. So Goodreads, if you're listening, please develop the half star.
I'm sure they're going to change it for our
I think they
podcast
should.
now.
I'm
So
not
yeah,
alone.
I
I'm
think
sure
they
a lot of
should.
people like the half-star function.
I never even rate stuff on Goodreads either, because I always am like, I'll change my
Yeah, but
mind.
then you can
Like
change the
just
review. I like
but
that.
I don't do that. Like I'll be, driving and like 6 months from now, and I'll suddenly be like, that book wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And then I will never remember to go back, and there will always be like a 2-star review when there should have been 3.
Well, the
And so
reason
I
I
always
still like
feel,
rating stuff, I know a lot of people, especially people more connected industry, tend to stop rating at some point. But the reason why I think it's still great to do it is you can't look at somebody's letterbox who just watches a movie and then get excited to watch it because they watched it, because that doesn't tell you anything about whether it's worth watching or not. So like
it's
if you give
true.
a 3.5 to some crazy old Giallo,
Yeah.
who cares? The argument I'd say probably to the industry people use it. I'd say maybe you just don't do really contemporary brand new things and things associated with people. But like from
But
movies from 70s, 80s, who's going to give a flying fuck? No one.
but I ran into the problem where I would watch something from like 1992 and give it 2 stars, and then like months later I would meet that
Yeah.
filmmaker, and then I'm like, oh god, he's gonna look at my letterbox. Did I feel shitty?
I'm risking it into the world. But because it
Okay,
is about
so
sharing things ultimately, whatever we're doing, we want to share, we want people to get turned on to cool stuff.
yeah, I will say I am deep into Catriona Ward's new book, Looking
Oh,
Glass
cool.
Sound, that came out in 2023 that I hadn't gotten to yet. And I've got I just finished a bunch more graphic novels that I'll save for next show, but 3 that I read during my COVID couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So these were awesome. First, Door to Door, Night by Night. I picked this up because it's Colin Bunn. He's been on our show several times before. I will read anything Colin does. And plus, this is Vault. And I have been really digging a lot of the stuff that Vault has been doing. They're definitely kind of they did Autumnal last
Yep,
year.
they
So
both.
like they're doing some really tight stuff in the horror space. This one is really cool. It is about a group of traveling salesmen, which I don't know if you had anything like this in New Zealand, but it was very much a thing in southern Appalachia, Virginia, where a group of people will roll into a town and they will go door to door giving away family portraits, or it's like $10 for like an Olin Mills family portrait, and all the money goes to your local fire department. And so we did it when I was a kid. We got all of our family portraits that way when I was a kid, because mom would always be like, we're donating to the fire department. And then you go and they snap a bunch of other pictures and you upgrade your package. And that's how Olin Mills makes money off of it. And so it is about a group of traveling salesmen who their job is to go town to town and push these pictures, and they keep half of it. So $5 of each one goes to the fire department and 5 goes to them for making the sale. And on the way, they pick up this hitchhiker who is real cagey and weird. And that night she leaves the group. They're trying to convince her to join their team. Like, she seems like a real people person, join our sales group. And that night she leaves the group and she goes to this deserted house, and one of the guys follows her, and there he sees a real life monster demon, and she fights it and destroys it. And she says, I can't join your crew. I travel town to town fighting these monsters. And now that you've seen it, you can never unsee it. You will now see it everywhere you go. And so as they pick back up and they're like, man, that was a wild fucking night, and start traveling town to town again, they realize that they are now seeing this weird stuff, and that it is now on them to kind of battle this evil that they have been seeing. And so really cool premise, really good characters, because it is this kind of ragtag group of traveling salesmen. Really good stuff. So I deeply enjoyed that one. I know it continues. I read volume 1. I know it's still going, so keep going with it because I loved it. This one, Ghosted. This is an old one from like 2013, so this is almost 10 years old. It took me a while to circle to it, but had a blast with this one as well. This is from Image, I believe. Yeah, Image. It is about a very rich, eclectic man who collects supernatural oddities. So picture like, oh gosh, the Conjuring couple. Why did their name just the Warrens? Mm-hmm. So like the Warrens, where they collect supernatural oddities. But if it was like Elon Musk doing that, and he could buy like every weird, fucked up supernatural object in the world that was even remotely connected to a murder or ghost. And the guy determines that he has every supernatural weirdo object he could possibly ever want, but the big thing he really wants in his collection is he wants to own a ghost. And so he hires this career criminal who's like robbed banks and, you know, all of these different scams, to put together a team to go into this incredibly haunted house that is about to be demolished. They know it's going to be torn down within a week, and steal a ghost. And it's supposed to be one of the most haunted houses in America. And so their job is to break into the house and figure out how to trap a ghost and steal it and bring them back to this guy. So this guy will now own a spirit. And it's great. It was very much like, you know, the ragtag group of criminals. Like, it feels Expendables-ish, but all within the realm of kind of a 13 ghost. I'm really shocked this has not been made into a movie yet. And it's now like 10 years old, so I assume it's kind of open at this point. So anybody out there, Ghosted, it was a really cool premise because it did have this kind of 13 ghost meets Expendables vibe to it. Last one I will talk about. Holy fuck, Night of the Ghoul was amazing.
Oh, that's the one I want to borrow from you, yeah.
I've been hearing so much good stuff about this. I know it's already kind of being courted to become something bigger. But yeah, Night of the Ghoul, I'd been hearing a lot about it. This one is from Dark Horse. It starts out with this guy and his son who show up at what you think is a nursing home, like a convalescent home. And they say it's really late at night, and they're like, yeah, we're insurance adjusters, and we have to go in and talk to this old man who is there and clearly dying, about his insurance and kind of last wishes and how he wants his final days to play out. And they get in there and they close the door, and they're like, oh my God, we found you. We know who you really are. And then they disclose that he is this film director from the 1920s who made this absolutely crazy film called Night of the Ghoul, which was never released because supposedly half the footage was lost and there was all this tragedy on set. But you learn that this guy is not an insurance adjuster. He works at a film studio, specifically like a film storage facility, and he found the footage. And he's watched like half the movie, and he's trying to figure out where the rest of the footage is and what the story is behind it. And that all happens within like the first 4 pages. That's literally like the cold open of this. And then you get the story of what happened on the film Night of the Ghoul, what happened on the set, the story behind it, oh gosh, this was so good. This was just so good.
Is that one book? Just so I know.
One book.
One book. All the issue. Okay.
One book.
When I see this week, I want it. I want it.
I don't think this was ever. It may have been released as issues, but I definitely, it read as a graphic novel. Cool. Sometimes when I'm reading these volume collections, I do weeklies sometimes. Like I did weeklies with Deviant back during December, which was awesome. But usually I'll wait for the volumes because I do like to sit down and read them like a big comprehensive thing. A lot of times when I'm reading them, you can feel the breaks. You can feel where it's breaking for the single monthly issues. This, I didn't feel it. This read like a novel. So if it was doing weeklies, entirely possible because it's Dark Horse. It reads really well as a straightforward novel. I read this all in one sitting, like 3 hours one night, just laying in bed with COVID.
Cool.
And it's so fucking good. So Scott Snyder's Night of the Ghoul, it's awesome.
I'm currently reading Monica by Dan Clowes, and I'm really taking each chapter, I taking my time and putting it down at the end of the night because I love his stuff is so good, and but it'd be too easy to get through it too quick, and so it's less of a full story than it is little vignettes by just the way he sees. He's my all-time favorite, like, artist, writer, character. So such a fan.
You know what I'm reading? Looking Glass Down. But you know what else I just got yesterday? I took a trip to the Los Angeles Public Library, and I just picked up Blood of the Virgin, which
cool.
I know was like one of your faves.
It's my favorite thing. Yeah, it's so cool. It's less of a. It sounds like a horror thing. It's much less a horror thing than it is more like Corman world filmmaking. So you'll dig it regardless because it's that world. It's so cool. And that you could read in just a couple reads, but
well, that's
pretty
good because it just came out last year, so it was considered a new release. So I'm on a 14-day loan, so I got to get that shit back in 2 weeks. So I got to jump in.
Yeah, it's really cool. Okay, well, that is what we've been watching, and that somehow still felt and reading and watching. And still fresh, even though we did all these things 2 weeks ago. But now let's look forward to the future because we are going to kind of just charge through 5 upcoming horror things. Last year was a pretty great year in movies, pretty good year in horror, but not a great year compared to maybe a couple of years recently. So this year will be interesting. There's a lot of big things, interesting things coming, but we also will see at some point the effects of a long strike. Probably towards the end of the year, we'll start to see that there'll be less stuff. So I am curious, but let's take it away with our 5 horror things. They could be films, they could be anything. I think I did all films, but what?
I have a book on here.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna kick us off with Beetlejuice 2.
Makes sense.
Only took like 30 years or so to get this film made, but I am so excited to see what they do with it. Original cast, Michael Keaton back, and then somehow also Jenny Ortega and Willem Dafoe. This one is coming in September of 2024. You've already been seeing kind of footage of it, behind the scenes stills, things like that. I cannot wait to see what happens with it, this much later. Like, where does it go from here?
Obviously, probably the fact that it became a hit musical went a long way.
Right.
It makes sense that it would be back in the zeitgeist to warrant a sequel, and that Michael Keaton has had like a nice career comeback. So we haven't seen Michael Keaton play a fun role since his kind of like Birdman's not necessarily fun. It's kind of depressing, and that Spotlight's super depressing, but he's great in it. It's like we haven't seen him cut loose. So I'm like, I want to see that again. I'm curious what he'll be like cutting loose again.
Well, I'm intrigued because the teaser posters that they've been putting up, they're playing Beetlejuice as it looks like scary. Like it is very much like this shadowy figure in the background, and you still know it's him. And I'm sure it's going to be comedic, but the teasers that they are doing, he is scary in them.
Yeah, I'll be curious. All right, my number 5 is less that I think this will be a great movie. I'm super freaking curious about adaptation, which is Faces of Death, a movie that you wouldn't be straight away going, yes, remake that as a narrative fiction movie. But here we are, and it's the director of from last year's How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is in my top 10 of last year. Just
it's a great movie.
Yeah, great, solid procedural, really interesting. I thought it deserved an Oscar for adaptation just because it's the most unlikely adaptation. It's from like a philosophical text or something. And he also made Cam in 2018, the horror film Cam. So very interesting director, Daniel Goldhaber, and this is, I guess, it is one of the stars of Barbie. Her name was no, not Barbie, Euphoria. Her name's Barbie. Her name's Barbie Ferreira. She is, I think, from what there's very little online about what the kind of concept is, but I think it's going to be somebody.
I heard it's like haunted video.
Yeah, somebody discovering a tape, playing it, and something bad happening. Outside of that, I have no clue. But and I haven't seen anything, or so I'm just deeply because this is taking something that was the ultimate of video net. Like there aren't anything else that compares to the kind of the legend around even though it's largely fake, around this particular film. So to make it to take it into the mainstream and make a movie is super interesting. Tells us all we need to know about what IP is nowadays, which is anything. Anything could be IP from the past, even Faces of Death. So I look forward to seeing what they do with that.
I was having to explain this to my students a couple of days ago because I was talking about Faces of Death, and they were like, so what? It's just like a collection of videos. And I was like, yeah, but this was in a time before like Live Leak and YouTube. So, renting this weird, like homespun videotape from like a mom and pop video store that shows like car wrecks and a man being eaten by an alligator. Like this was, and it was, half of it was fake. I remember there was one that was like a giant leech attacking a woman when she swam too close to a nuclear power plant. You can tell it's fake. It's like a giant black thing glued across her chest. But then other parts were like legit, like here's people eating monkeys. And so it had this Mondo film element mixed with really over the top horror. And so, yeah, now it does not hold the same chic as it does because now you can watch all this shit and more online with, a single Google search.
I wish that Twitter didn't rebrand to X. I wish Twitter became Faces of Death. It was just, you go, did you post a Faces by Death? Because that's what it is for me. It's just car crashes and weird sex that pops up and I'm like, oh, great.
That's all I get anymore is sex on Twitter. It's like every single time I go in, every tweet that has me tagged in it has the word wet in the title. And I'm like,
no, it's gone pretty bleak out there.
Used to be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, sidebar. But yes. Okay, so Faces of Death. I'm going to take us to a graphic novel that I'm excited about because I wanted to include just one of them at least. And this is coming from Dark Horse by Steve Niles. And I'm just going to assume that he made this for me. It is called Satan's Swarm, and it is about evil killer bugs. So that's just, I'm in. I have no idea what it's about beyond Satan's Swarm being giant killer bugs, but I'm in. Steve Niles and killer bugs. Satan's Swarm. Let's do this. This is coming in April from Dark Horse.
We got sent a screener today. I don't know if you did, but I think you probably did at the same time about one. And if this is on your list,
is this the shark movie
about the plane crashing in the water and then there's sharks? I know. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this was made for Bekah. It doesn't matter if it's good. It's because there was one of those airport movies. I think Airport 77. It's a really good movie. It's where the plane crashes into goes deep sea. It's on the bottom of the thing. It's like Jack Lemmon's the pilot, and it's really good, but doesn't have sharks. So
what's the cruise ship that flips upside
Poseidon
down?
Adventure.
Poseidon Adventure.
Which
yeah,
I like that one too.
So yeah, which is a great movie, but no sharks. Yeah. No, the day that they did a press release on this one, so it's a plane crash trapped at the bottom of the ocean, and they can't get out of the plane because of sharks, like all around. The day that they did the announcement on this, I messaged Mark Ward and I was like, I need a screener of this now.
Okay, and that's probably why we both got it. And I will, just because we're talking about it, I just pulled it up. It's called No Way Up. We haven't seen it yet, but it's called No Way Up.
I'm so excited to watch this.
No, I can't wait to. Okay, so that will be on your next episode.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, next episode I'll get that in. Okay, so Satan's Swarm coming in April, Dark Horse.
Yeah, I have as much to say about this one too. Number 4, a no-brainer. I could not be more excited about the fact that we get a new Alien film, Alien Romulus, a standalone, which is important because it's not part of another trilogy or saying standalone Alien film directed by Fede Alvarez. To me, that is like the most exciting possible scenario. Like a guy who can just make movies that just fucking rock is taking on something so fun, and I've almost never really been disappointed by an Alien film. Like even Alien vs. Predator is still watchable, right? It's like kind of fun and. But the main ones are almost all uniformly brilliant to very good. And so the fact that, and I heard, according to Fede at least, he screened it recently for Ridley Scott once he finished, and apparently the quote was, "That's fucking amazing." And so if Ridley Scott says that's fucking amazing, I'm excited about it. It has the lead actress, which I think will be interesting, from the new Priscilla, the movie. She's one of them, Kaylee Spaney, and Isabel Marquette, which is Dora the Explorer from the Dora movie.
I loved the Dora the Explorer movie. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it was fun.
And so the only thing I know about this, and it might not even be true, but one of the actors leaked that they said it took place between Alien 1 and 2. So timeline wise, so it's like cool. Okay. But Alien Romulus, it says August 16th, so that'll be summer, something to look forward to in summer.
Okay, so I'm going to take us to Speak No Evil.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is a Scandinavian film that Elric and I covered. I can't remember if it's Norway or, Sweden. What's the other
one?
Film?
Is Holland. Holland and Denmark? Denmark's definitely one of them.
Denmark.
They're Danes and Netherlands, maybe.
Remember.
I think Danes and Netherlands, but...
We're just calling out countries, y'all. Yeah. It's all the countries. Anyway, the point being, we had covered this film a couple of years ago. It came to Shudder, and it was about 2 families that meet on vacation, and they're from 2 very different countries that are right next to each other. And I'm going to Google this as soon as I'm done talking, so I'm not sounding so off on it. but two families from neighboring countries who become friends and decide to kind of go visit each other. But they get there and they discover that it's not even that customs are different, just their general demeanors. Like one family, and it's the culture is very curt, tends to just say what they think. They, if suddenly they want to make out with somebody, they're just going to make out with them. Whereas the other culture, the other family tends to be very buttoned up. They tend to be very reserved. They tend to be very quiet. And so throughout the course of their week together, you gradually see the one family kind of becoming louder and the other family becoming more unnerved, but trying to still be really polite about everything that's going on until it turns into a horror film. And this came out, it was probably 2020. And it was honestly one of my most haunting films I had seen that year. It gets really fucked up at the end.
Oh, it's probably one of the darkest of the decade in terms of where it goes.
So fucked up. And so this is being remade by James Watkins as the director, starring James McAvoy. And so I want to see what they do with an American remake of this, because where do you set it? Is this like an American Canada thing? Because that kind of strong division does not exist unless it becomes like a class thing. I'm intrigued to see how they do this, how they get that kind of cultural differences, unless it becomes like a political thing too,
which would be almost too on the nose. That's the thing.
Too on the nose.
This is quite a subtle movie until it's not. It's really subtle, and then it goes really, really Haneke hard at the end.
Haneke is the best comparison, and I feel like if they just did like a red versus blue state, it's going to be too
obvious, too easy.
So it's got to be something more subtle, because that's what was so good about the original, is it was just these subtle cultural differences that at first it just seems like ha ha ha, okay, so that's what you do. You're insulting me by not eating my dinner. That's like a very cultural thing, and it keeps escalating until it explodes. And so Speak No Evil, this one's coming to theaters August 9th, and while you're talking about your next one, I'm going to see what the actual two original countries were.
Before you do that, I'm going to predict Sweden and Denmark. That's my final.
I think it was
unless Sweden it's Denmark and Amsterdam, but Netherlands. But anyway,
hold on, I'm here. It was Danes, Danish, and Dutch.
So Dutch is Amsterdam, Amsterdam.
Yeah, so it was Danes and Dutch.
So Netherlands, Netherlands and Denmark. Interesting. Okay, because Swedes and Denmark also share a border, and they are very similar, but there are different. Yeah.
And it was all about like passive veganism and versus like aggressive behaviors and swearing, and it was just these cultural differences.
I feel I can guess which one I think McAvoy will play, and that would be a good thing, because I do like when McAvoy gets something juicy. So let's hope. And he's had good luck with Blumhouse before, so obviously. But okay, so my next one really kicks in the heads. That is Maxine, which is sadly a reference to what's going on behind the scenes, to extras on that set. But from what we hear. But anyway, Maxine is the third installment of Ti West Bloody trilogy. Nothing can stop me. No outrages of on-set violence can stop me from wanting to see this movie. I'm very excited about it. I love the first one. I like the second one a lot, the prequel, Pearl, a lot. But I'm most excited to see a different style film, and I think that's what's been so cool about these for him. He's not just some guy cashing in on a trilogy. He's making wildly different movies. Pearl is wildly different than X, and I think this will be even more so. I think this will be very 80s synthwave. I've heard it's a love letter to Argento and that kind of filmmaking that might even be a giallo of some kind, but it is the character of Maxine who survives X, goes to Los Angeles, becomes an actress. I don't know if it's set in the porn world. There was some early talk of that, or if it's just or if it's just going to be like movie acting. Like we'll see, probably of both. But it has like
the fact that it's called XXX. I feel like
but that's her name. We'll see. I assume that too, but who knows? Or maybe it'll be like normal acting, but then drifting into that. We can hope, because
she's a porn actress.
She was, yeah. So, but this has some really big hitters in it that makes you actually guarantee that it's the porn world, like Kevin Bacon, of course, Giancarlo Esposito.
I think Kevin Bacon. I immediately think porn.
I do, probably because of that movie with what's the one where he comes out with this full bacon out? Wild Thing. It's pretty great. It's but Lily Collins.
It's full bacon.
He pulls his full bacon. He goes full bacon. And he is full bacon. So hats off to Kevin Bacon. He backs it up with full bacon. Anyway, I think Maxine's going to be the best of the three. That's my feeling, my gut, and this is opening night for me.
Okay. I will join you, I
Yes.
assume, at the New Bev for this one,
Yeah,
because we've seen
if
the
they put
other
it on
two
film again,
at the
yes,
New
for
Bev. I
sure.
feel like we'll be there. Okay, next up for me, Robert Eggers'
Oh,
Nosferatu. Wow. I mean, like, it makes sense, but it felt unexpected for me. So this is the witch and the lighthouse guy. Okay, yeah, so Nosferatu totally tracks. So remaking a one of our earliest horror films from 1920s. And this one, it's got Bill Skarsgård. He's bringing Willem Dafoe back, but not
I know.
playing Nosferatu in this one like he did in Shadow of a
So
Vampire.
weird.
It's a different, yeah. So, and this one, and this is a swing of a release window. Christmas Day to release a horror film on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
And most films are hesitant to release that late in the year because it knocks them out of a lot of Oscar and award discussions. And so I'm kind of it's a baller move
yeah.
to go
I
that
kind of
late in
wish
the
that would
year.
be more in the Halloween region, but
Yeah.
interesting.
So right now, Christmas Day.
What
So
challenge is, can they make
I'm
it
excited
scary?
to
That's
see.
what I want to see,
Yeah.
because I don't feel any of the other versions. They're scary in their way and maybe at the time, but like,
Yeah.
Werner Herzog's looks gorgeous and it's weird, but it never creeps me out.
No, I
It's
mean it's
Kinski
Kinski,
and
so he's just creepy to
yeah,
begin with, but it's much more about like watching Kinski chew furniture than it is about, it actually being
yeah,
scary. And the original's the same. The original, it's unnerving. But it was 1920s. It was far more like, about making it expressionistic and very artistic and not exactly, jump scares of the 1920s were not really a thing yet. So
interesting. Yeah, no, I'm excited about this one too. My number two is, I'm very curious. David Cronenberg coming back with another
mm-hmm.
film, maybe last. We'll see. Called The Shrouds, and very weird idea. And he says it's very personal, like his most personal film, so probably to do with death. He must be just under 80 still. He is about an innovative businessman, it says, who's a grieving widower. He builds a device in a controversial new cemetery where people can pay, and there's a device that allows you, whenever you want, to come visit and see your loved one. You can see them as they're buried, and you can watch them decompose in real time. And it is a way to connect to the dead. And I'm like, well, that sounds bleak as fuck.
Yeah.
But because it's Cronenberg, I'm like, that's interesting. It's Vincent Cassel's the main guy, Diane Kruger, Guy Pearce. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know what this is going to be yet, but it just sounds like such a Cronenberg. It just sounds so perfectly him, and to make a movie
Yeah.
about death like that when you're, approaching 80 as a filmmaker like that, that's a really interesting, somebody who wants to look at it, not be scared to look at it. So I'm in whatever it is.
Okay. That I'll be there with you at the theater
Watching
for that
our
one.
dearly departed. Yes.
I'll be the one unnerved next to you as you get
Yes.
giddy.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
that sounds like something that's gonna fuck me
Yeah.
up. Okay, so these weren't in random order, but this is definitely one of the big ones that I'm looking forward to. Another one about a potentially cursed videotape. This is Paul Tremblay's new book.
Yes.
Now, I've always been a huge Paul Tremblay fan. On June 11th, though, he is releasing a book entitled Horror Movie. And the box of it, the cover of it, looks like a videotape. And just reading the bare bones log line that has been released on it, it sounds like a cursed videotape movie or book. So I am in for anything Paul Tremblay does. He's such a huge horror fan. So to see him kind of return to this, it is a horror film, or it is, I take that back. It is about a horror film that is shot in 1993 that is getting a reboot, and it's not a videotape that's cursed. It's like the film and something about the film coming back to haunt people. Again, real vague. I'm talking about things I don't really know about because they gave you like a sentence. So yeah, it's about a reboot of some type of film in 1993 that is cursed. And so it's got this 90s video vibes. I'm intrigued for whatever it is.
And if I was him and I was listening to this podcast, I'd be like, man, I should send both of them early advanced copies.
Oh, I've already been in touch with
just
him.
to get it out there,
I
Well,
already
this is a much more public
him.
shaming attempt on my part. So if Paul's listening, we're
so I'm not just flubbing my way through a small log line that they gave me trying to expound upon it. Yeah. We'll get that. We'll get that book.
Yeah, no,
I'm
excited.
excited.
Great cover. I just marked it on Goodreads like, I want to read this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my last one is the one I am just most excited about. It was just Nicolas Cage's 60th birthday a couple days ago. He's announced he's retiring from films. He said he's going to do 2 or 3 more movies, and then
yeah, right.
I totally believe it. I totally do, because
Oh my God, this is like Motley Crue's final
He's
concert.
not going
Like,
to stop acting, but I think he
yeah,
just
right.
said, "I've done." Well, the difference with Cage is though is like he has been on a track for the last decade, making like 5 or 6 movies, a lot of them not great, straight to video
Hmm.
stuff for money. That will burn a person out, and I think he's been making in the last like few years. He's had one in the last 3 years where he's given like the best performance of the year like 3 times in a row. Still
Hmm.
kind of mostly each time snubbed by the Oscars, and like Pig should have won an Oscar. And so I'm kind of like, okay, maybe he does feel like he's done it all. But he said his son showed him a show called, he goes, he showed me the show. It's called Breaking Bad, and I seeing what that actor could do in that, I was like, oh my God, I want to do something like that. So he has said he wants to do TV after this, so which is fascinating. But anyway, hey, if True Detective Nick Cage season, bring it. And
I'll
all I
watch
could
it.
say is bring it. Anyway, so he has a new film directed by Blackcoat's daughter, director Oz Perkins. So you know I am in. Being very mysterious about the release. They're not saying much. Called Longlegs, A24. It's just called Longlegs. It is Nick Cage plays the serial killer. There's an investigation, something to do with an occult organization. The main detective is Micah Monroe, who we all love, and is just
Hmm.
doing great work after great work. And that's all I really know. And I think it's something like where the serial killer has been trying to maybe entrap that character, saying all from the start. Anyway, I don't know what it's going to be, but having just shown you Frozen Ground with Cage being the good guy, now we get to see Cage being the bad guy. Very exciting. And A24 style bad guy, very interesting. So I am all for that one. And I would say there's another one that's outside the bubble, but would be a number one. It's unsure if it's coming out this year. Probably will drift into the next year, but that is the new Zach Kreger Weapons,
Hmm.
post-barbarian movie. Pedro Pascal's in it. It's probably nothing's known except it's like Magnolia in quote marks, people say, horror film. I'm like, okay, I am curious about that. But I don't know it's going to come out this year, so I didn't include it in the official list. But hey, that is all very cool stuff.
Yeah. On A24, I will say you should watch Dix the musical.
Oh,
It's
that's an A24?
bonkers.
Oh,
It's aiming to offend every single,
yeah.
demographical group that there is out there. But it's got horror notes to it.
Okay.
It does. And that's it. It has this weird Henenlotter vibe with it that is just kind of like, I did not expect it. It is not, this is a very much like a musical theater movie to go in knowing that, but it's hilarious. I thought it was absolutely hilarious with this weird Henenlotter vibe
Well,
happening
another
with it
asterisk one
as
from
well.
them I would put is it just played at Sundance this week. That's why I'm kind of even more excited now, which is the Rose Glass's new one, Love Lies Bleeding, with Kristen Stewart
Hmm.
becoming like a buff bodybuilder and like a revenge film. And I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, I want to see what Rose Glass would make as a crazy revenge film. So that's one hopefully we'll maybe try to get her on the show, because we didn't get to really cover St. Maud because it didn't get a proper release at the time. So
Release, they were in pandemic
yeah,
mode.
so
Yeah.
I think there's some exciting
Um,
stuff coming up.
I'm going to quickly plug that I have two books releasing. Well, a book and a comic book.
Nice.
Sometime in the fall, I have a YA graphic novel, Pretty Evil, which is, I compare it to like Evil Dead for 16-year-old girls, coming from Simon and Schuster's McKendry Press. I will be talking more about it as it gets closer, but I am super excited to finally get my first graphic novel out there. As well as from Dark Horse, I have a comic coming later in the fall called Barstow, which is just a fun desert horror, true crime
I
noir.
love desert
So
set thrillers
you
and
read
horror.
Barstow. I think
I
you read
saw
it.
like a pitch thing for it. I don't think I ever read.
I think I had it as a TV pitch
Yeah,
eons ago,
yeah.
and so
I
I think you
remember the
read the
concept, but
TV.
I'm all that's one of yours that I definitely want to read, because that's the kind
Yeah.
of I just love that world. I never get sick of seeing things that.
Yeah, crime noir, desert. I'm all in. It's my Red Rock West, and so yeah, this is coming from Dark Horse, probably like November, December region. So
And I promise that my film The Dead Thing will play in 2024.
it
I
will
just don't know
play.
where yet, because I'm just starting to send it right now.
I'm
So,
excited
but
to
I
get
did
it out
finish.
there.
That's something.
Yes.
But yeah, all right,
Okay.
big year.
Let's get Josh Forbes in.
Yeah, our first episode back. Let's talk to our buddy Josh Forbes. Okay, we are back, and joining us for the first time today, even though we
Today.
recorded this exact conversation 2 weeks ago, but it was destroyed by all our neighbors' computer hackers. We want to bring back a good friend of ours, Josh Forbes, to talk about
Hi
Destroy All
guys.
Neighbors. But
honestly, any extra time I can hang out with Josh Forbes is great.
But it's also
it's
also a plus
thanks,
though, because
thanks.
well, I find this interesting. We did have this conversation. We've already talked about how our last episode didn't make it, but we had a conversation on the day after the movie came out. It has now been 2 weeks, and at the time, Bekah hadn't had a chance to see it either. So this is actually kind of cool. Now she has seen it. You've had 2 weeks of this film being out. How's it been? How the last 2 weeks been?
Pretty great. I mean, it seems like people have really been loving it. We already have one person who got a tattoo of
That's
Vlad.
Amazing. That is absolutely amazing. I wish I had that much like balls, like just to be like, I saw this like movie I kind of like, I'm gonna go get it tattooed on my body forever.
Right.
Like I do not, I will spend years deliberating tattoos and then completely abandon them
for pretty good reason. It's like it's there forever.
Right. I want that. I want to look back and be like, yeah, it's this movie I saw once. It like kicked ass. I got the tattoo the next day. I wish I had that type of just fortitude to just, I'm standing by this.
You're talking to a guy, Josh, and not everyone knows this. He has a back tattoo of White Chicks, the film, by the Wayans, and it is wild. Yeah. It's an uncanny back tattoo, I'll tell you that.
It's pretty weird, yeah. It's for my wife. My wife.
I know. She's
we actually got a fight about that. She like really remember she had watched that and she was like, those Wayans brothers are pretty good looking.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
No, actually,
I was like, I'm like,
they are. Yeah, out of that white.
Elric just recently watched that movie
for the first
right?
time. Yeah, I refused when it came out because it was the most uncanny looking freak. It just freaked me out the way it looked in the trailer, and then I watched it a couple days ago for the calendar. But
yeah, I still find it to be awkwardly cringy, I'll call it.
Yeah,
I just don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
For Lady Ballers.
Oh yeah,
heard about that?
I have heard about that one. Yeah. Anyway, this is a digression of back tattoos. Yeah. But we were, super impressed by this movie, and like, it's a little weird because we talked 2 weeks ago, but like part of the press part was it's a wild pitch of a movie for one that I remember being like, oh shit, how will that get made? And B, it really has your voice, and that's the hardest thing to do for anyone is get a film made and still retain the kind of voice, the kind of personality and humor that is Josh Forbes. It is all over this thing.
It is that movie. Yeah. Now, I'm going to start with a couple of questions that I'd asked in the prior interview because I was really into your answers that I want to be able to share with the world. First off, you shot this in LA, which isn't done much anymore. So I wanted to talk about kind of how you were able to get this off the ground. Let's start with the pitch because this is based off like a real life event for you, right? Which not that you killed all your neighbors, but
exactly.
It came close, is what I'm saying.
Legally, I'm not allowed to agree with what you're saying, but no, I mean, I lived in Little Armenia, like East Hollywood, and my buddy Charlie was living like in like Hollywood area. And we both were just, we were just complaining about our neighbors. Like I had this neighbor who would like bang on the wall when I had a newborn and he would just like scream, that he was going to do terrible things to my child. And, or you would just hear hear moaning in the hallway, like at 3 a.m. And I'd peek out and this guy would just be like so drunk that he's just jamming his key into his doorknob. Like,
can you imagine how great the story would end up being if that turns out to be Alex Winter? Like, that's how you met him for the movie.
That's Alex Winter.
He's threatening your child. He's going to kill you.
I'm like, wait a second.
That would be great.
Are you a lost boy? And so I was like complaining to my buddy Charlie, saying, because I would just lay at night just thinking of all the terrible things I would want to do to this guy or whatever, like, or what I might have to do to protect my family. And he was like, oh, I'll do you one better. And his story was very similar to what ended up being in the movie. But he has this neighbor who would like psychologically like mess with him. Like he would listen to Sade like really loud. What's the big Sade song? I can't remember.
I don't know who Sade
wrong
is.
podcast, sir.
Yeah,
sorry.
How dare you?
You've asked the two least cool people in the entire world.
Okay. No, I like that song.
Oh, that's old. That's like before my time. Okay, Smooth Operator, got it.
But that's just the most insane thing to hear, very loud next door. Just smooth, operator. And so his neighbor, and he would like, tell him like, hey, Charlie, feel my muscle. just really intimidating.
Yeah.
And so, so we started talking about it, and eventually, like, we got to the point where I was like, maybe there's a movie. I mean, I probably say maybe there's a movie here, like probably 3 or 4 times a day, like just about everything I see, where I'm like, oh, that's weird. Maybe that's a movie. But sure enough, like we were able to start outlining it, and Charlie just, he's a very enthusiastic guy, and build in the draft, and then we, 10 years later, here we are.
10 years, is that how long it took?
It took, I think the first initial emails between us were like 10 years ago.
Now, everybody at home, I assume, is like, holy shit, 10 years to make a movie. That's standard from like conception to actually, like, that's not insane. I've heard far worse.
Yeah, it's not, it's kind of not that bad. I mean, it's not like we were doing only that. That would be insane. But yeah, I mean, so eventually, we got a draft that we liked, and we ended up sending it to Jonah Ray. And I think in my email, I was like, hey man, I have this movie that I'm working on, and it's like Barton Fink meets Evil Dead, and he, like, his response was like, call me the fuck right now. And so I did. And yeah, he came on board, and he had so much input, and put so much life into it. And then at that point, brought in my friend Mike Benner, who's a writer for Bob's Burgers. And he kind of brought the skill set that we needed, like the ability to sort of break a story, and I don't know, spell things correctly, whatever. Not that Charlie couldn't spell things correctly, but
Charlie. Charlie's cool.
We love Charlie. But anyway, so Benner kind of like infused it with a lot more comedy. And then I think at that point, then Jonah and I had seen Bill and Ted 3, and we saw how, like, Alex when he's like in the big muscle, he's like a prisoner. He's like a huge prosthetic, like, prisoner guy. And we were both like, oh shit, that's Vlad. And so it was a total Hail Mary, which I have been told is a sports term for a last ditch effort.
In football, yes.
Yeah. So it was just like, hey, we just wanted, like, to see if he just, if he wanted to come on as a producer or give us some notes, or just, whatever. And he read the script and he really liked it. And he was like, well, what do you want from us, or from me? And I was like, well, I mean, if you want to play Vlad, you could. And he's like, that would be amazing. And so from there, we had another writer, Jared Logan, hop on, and he, really spiffed it up. And, the guy that I owe everything to is Joe Lynch, really. Jonah had told Joe about it, and he got so excited that he sent it to his buddies at Shudder. And
this feels like a Joe Lynch project. It feels like something, I mean, knowing Joe's personality as well, this feels like that.
And he's a really enthusiastic person who also does throw his weight behind things, which is great. I'm a little shocked that the Alex Winter connection didn't come through Freaked, to be honest. I guess in my brain, there's so much connectivity between your film and Freaked, just in the in that cult vibe feel. For sure. But so obviously you're a fan of that.
Yeah. Well, so Jonah had a office here in South Pasadena, and it was right across the alley from Alex's office. And so, like, I didn't know Alex at all, and Jonah, like, knew him a little bit. And so yeah, while we would do notes and stuff, or like break scenes, I would just fantasize. I'm just like, dude, like, Alex, like, I love Freak so much. So it's just like, we got to get this Alex Winter, just so he can sprinkle some Freak dust on it. But yeah, I mean, movies like Freaked, and even I went back and saw Bill and Ted 2.
All produced by my co-teacher Scott Krupp. Thank you.
Awesome. But there's just so much good prosthetic, like part 2 is very horror adjacent, or
you've got death in it. Yeah,
they go to hell.
Comedy. Yeah.
But he, like, there's a bit where Alex, like, becomes Granny Preston, and is, like, chasing him through these hallways and stuff.
I forgot that scene.
Really,
that scene was, like, legit scary when I was a kid.
Yeah, and I read that. I read the novelization of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
I kind of love that there is one.
Yeah. which is just because when I was a kid, that was the thing. Like before a movie came out, I would get really excited and I would read the novelization, so I knew about, like I'd read the Batman book before I saw the movie, so I told everybody, you know, all the spoilers or whatever. Just a weird phenomenon.
It's weird to think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's weird to think like Freaked was a movie that we all love and it's like a total cult, but it was a complete failure when it landed. But like you think about the times now, had Freaked came out today, it would have gone directly to Shudder and would have been beloved by everyone who subscribes to that channel. It would have found its audience straight away. So movies have just changed so much in how we receive them.
Yeah, and that budget was, he was telling me about it. Like they had a really big budget. That was like a studio movie, which is insane.
Was like 90s. Like that would have had a decent budget, I feel like, especially coming off of like Bill and Ted for him. So what I want to ask about is, so Alex is in full prosthetic makeup for the entire film. I'd love to hear about the creation of it, and then how long did it take to put on and get off every day? Especially because sometimes his head is in weird places. Like I kept thinking, did they have to put him in the couch before they put the prosthetic on? Like it was the whole question of like how you were managing it.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess to put it on, it took 3 hours, which he said is a lot lighter than it normally has been in the past. And then he said that I guess like to take it off, it's pretty immediate. So he's, apparently the technology is better. And, I think it was kind of a nice thing for him. I mean, obviously like, we were all in this hot warehouse, like in a hotter, even a hotter set. And so he was in like, this air conditioned room with his old buddy, Bill Corso, who did all the Bill and Ted movies with him. And, Bill Corso was doing all the application of the makeup. But the origin of it was from Gabe Bartalos. Gabe was another part of the dream team that, early on when I was just me and Charlie, Charlie had worked with Gabe. He'd worked at his studio, and so that was always in our back pocket. Was like, okay, well maybe we can get this to Gabe Bartalos. And sure enough, like once things started to go, he got really excited about it, and then. So he sculpted Vlad. I mean, I presented him a bunch of different ideas. Like my idea was more like kind of a big bald, like fleshy, almost like bowling pin of a person. Mainly based on a neighbor that I had. But we kind of didn't want it to be such a super overweight, like it didn't want to be like making fun of, we didn't want to be fat shaming, I guess. So we wanted it to be more realistic, which is a good impulse. I think my impulses are like, let's make everything insane. But Alex is like, well, let's have it be a real person. It's just that in Jonah's head, he's a monster. And so he just started coming up with different like sketches, and that was the one that we landed on. But it was just really important to us that it was something that felt iconic, that felt that you could do like a Halloween costume of it if you wanted. That was always a big. That was something that Violent J from the Insane Clown Posse taught me. Is he's like, you go, what's the action figure, man? Can somebody dress like it for Halloween?
Which I have to say, a couple of years ago, Josh went to Gathering of the Juggalos to hang out with Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah.
Like were you making a documentary, or were you just like friends? Like I'm just going to hang out with them.
I met him because I've been doing this documentary about Gallagher forever, and so I interviewed them for that, and kind of became friends with Violent J.
Are they big Gallagher fans? This is getting weird.
Gallagher performed at the Gathering of the Juggalos 1 year.
Did not expect that. Okay.
Yeah.
You go on.
And they have a really funny story of one of their buddies, this guy named Upchuck the Clown, has this hilarious story about like it was his job to find Gallagher for the show, for the 3 a.m. show, and Upchuck like found him in his car passed out, and he thought he was dead. So he was just terrified, like, oh no, like I was supposed to be watching after Gallagher and he died, but he was alive at the time.
Did he make it to the 3 a.m. show at the Gathering of the Juggalos?
He killed it. Yeah. But also Gallagher would complain that he thought that ICP ripped him off. Like anyone who's ever made a mess on stage, he thinks he thought ripped him off, Guar and ICP. So that's how I knew them. But we were going to try and do a documentary. I don't know if that'll ever happen. Apparently working with insane clowns is not the most stable business model.
They seem to be doing great. So.
But they are doing great. But they did teach me about iconic characters to bring it all the way back. And Gabe had a good process too of like, what do he call like the silhouette of the character. He wanted each character to kind of have its own distinct shape. Mm-hmm. So we have like Philip, aka Pig Guy, and he's kind of a human pincushion. He has all these like, blades sticking out of his back. Or we have, Augie, who gets gets run over by a car and has a big tire tread on his face, which is just straight up like a Basket Case 3 character. Like that's just what it looks like. Like it's so much of the movie is just so dumb. Like it's just like the dumbest. Like it's just completely unrealistic. But we went with it.
Well, this question I didn't ask last time because I hadn't seen the movie yet. What was it like working with the pig?
Oh,
it was so cute. So that one of the characters is a pet pig, and Kosher the pig, and he's just like cruising around set. And I was like totally jealous that you got to like direct the pig.
Can we phone Jonah Ray for this answer?
I want to phone Jonah Ray.
I was at the live first screening of this, and Jonah Ray's first response was like, "I hate that fucking pig" or something like that.
Oh, no. Tell me about the pig because I would love it. I'd be on the floor like hugging him though.
Well, but that's the thing is we weren't able to really play with the pig. We weren't. It's like anytime you have an animal on set, it's never. I don't want to like burst your bubble, but it always is a pain in the ass. Because first what always happens is
it's like having kids on set. I know.
Yeah, well, kids I don't mind, but like anytime I've had an animal, the trainer's always like, "What do you want it to do?" And I'm always like, "I want it to go from point A to point B." And then they just look at me and they're like, "It's an animal, right?" Like every single time, no matter what. Like I worked with a reindeer, I worked with a falcon. They're always just like.
Did you work with a falcon?
It was a commercial for this place called Springs Preserve in Las Vegas or whatever.
Wow.
But it was just like we just needed it to fly, and it's always So this pig. So one of the things is like if you move quickly around it, it stops. So we have a shot where it's like the pig's supposed to run by and Jonah's supposed to jump away from it, but every time it would just stop, and then it would just scream, like just the most. Yeah, just the most horrific, like, like it's a tiny pig, but I was like off to the side, like, I was like, did somebody bring a boar on set? Like it just sounded like it was like Razorback. But sure enough, it's just this little cute pig.
Aww, well,
real diva though.
I guess you didn't like get it to sit, snuggle it or anything like that. So
no, I know. I mean, I think Jonah maybe got you a little bit, but yeah, I always wanted a pig as a
they're cute
kid.
So did I. Yeah, a number of years ago, I had Craig Perry come in and talk to my class, and he had just finished a movie with penguins, and I was so excited. I was like, "How are the penguins?" And his response was, "I hate those fucking penguins." Like,
yeah.
Okay. I get it.
I'm curious because at one point of the script, the character was a cartoonist, and then he becomes a prog rock musician who's working on an album kind of around the drain, circling the drain for most of his time. You as a music video director, somebody who directed a lot of music videos, how much did that help once you made the change to being a prog rock? How much did that aid? Because it feels like the aesthetic of music videos at times really suits what he's building towards, I thought.
Yeah. I think it helped a lot. I mean, there's like a big finale that is very much like a comedic music video montage. I mean, that background really helped a lot. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 scenes. There's like a bit where he's in the hallway and it's like very dreamlike where the camera's rushing at him and stuff. That very much that very much comes from like my music video roots of like it wasn't really on the schedule. Like I kept trying to tell the AD that it was on the schedule, but he kept, because it wasn't fleshed out in the script. He was
You
like, he
can't
wouldn't.
fool the AD.
No,
Well,
but I was
yeah.
like, yeah.
Well, I
But
just
at a
think.
certain point, I was just like, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, because the music video, I think not everyone realizes with directing, they see in music videos and they go, oh, cool, that person can direct. And it's like, well, directing is like so much more restraint needed for
Mm-hmm.
most movies because you don't get to do any of that. The characters motivate, the
Right.
camera moves and all that. But you found a movie, a shell of a movie that could,
Yeah.
like literally anything could happen. And I think that's pretty
Right.
smart for you, that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like so there was that moment when it was we just had to like tell the AD like, look, dude, like give me 3 minutes. Like give me the camera and Jonah in a hallway and the steady cam and like just go get some coffee or something,
Yeah.
you know. But it comes from the experience of like having to just cram your day with so much stuff. And you know, there's also like the sequence, like the drug party sequence, where similarly, like that very much was going to go away, but I was like, it was the same thing. We were just like, dude, like give me 5 minutes. And sure enough, like I think we shot it all very, very quickly. You know, but it's one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's really funny and visual and like, but that's always how it is. There's so many projects like that where it's like the best part is always the part where you're like chasing after to the very end, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the.
That's totally how you directed the JoJo Siwa music video. Just like, 5 minutes,
Yeah.
hallway, pig, drugs.
Yeah.
It's chaos.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's so
Yeah, she just
Siwa.
kept.
I mean, I think one of the hard
drugs,
things
drugs.
about movies now is that they end up on streamers for the most part. Like, well, they all end up on streamers eventually, but a lot of them start there. Tell me a little bit about the couple weeks of showing it in a theater, and what you maybe learn as a filmmaker from getting a chance to see it with a crowd a bunch of times, like you did. Because obviously, I was at the first screening, and it was riotous, and I know. I'm the type of person, if I then watch it at home, I'm going to get, a fifth of those jokes or a fifth of those laughs.
Right.
Just because of how you kind of approach material. So, what was that like the last couple of weeks?
I mean, showing it, we showed it at the Arrow, like Beyond Fest put it on. And that was amazing. That was the best. That was great. Like Weird Al was there. And Dana Gould was there. I'm sure there were other people. Barbara Crampton was there. Joe Lynch showed up. I think B Ghost was there too. But yeah, it's a comedy, so it's like it's meant to be seen with people. And it's what's funny is that there's like some of my favorite jokes in the movie. Like you'd hear 5 people laughing really, really hard, but it's kind of consistently like every time one of my favorite jokes would come by, there's like 5 or 10 people who are just dying laughing, and then it was pretty consistent even through because I went to a lot of the Alamo Drafthouse screenings, and it was a similar thing where you'd hear just a couple people just losing, a lot of the jokes, everyone's laughing. But there were just some of those where just some dumb reference to something, or
when Kamal's on screen, you get like that sequence is just I think anyone on the planet is going to be laughing through that sequence. I mean, for me, I told you afterwards, it was the Alex Winter, Vlad's character, when he first walks down the hallway and he's literally singing to himself the song from Night of the Hunter. He's leaning, and I'm sitting there going, "That's the Night of the Hunter song."
I didn't even catch
I was so excited, and I told him afterwards. He goes, "Yeah, Alex really likes that song."
yeah
But I mean, that's the kind of humor you're throwing 100 jokes at a time. And the Toxic Avenger one that was played at Beyond Fest was a similar kind of thing, where it's just like it's stuffed to the guilt to the point where you could get exhausted just halfway through because of the jokes. But that's that is also a plus because so many were landing in this. I'm curious how people will react in the long term to these kind of movies, just only at home. It's so different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's It definitely has that feel of, I don't know, like a movie that a bunch of people, like you get a bunch of beers and you throw it on and you're just like going crazy, I mean, that was always the goal. Like, I know everybody wants to make like a cult classic or whatever. Yeah. And I feel like the second that you try to make it a cult film, then it won't happen.
Yeah.
But it was always like in the back of my head of like, okay, I want this to be that kind of movie that people that, you know, older brothers are going to tell their younger brothers or sisters about, you know, like, oh, dude, you haven't seen this? Oh, you got to check this out.
Well, if you had discovered it, you would be laughing your ass
Yeah.
off and enjoying yourself,
Oh my
even
gosh.
if you hadn't made it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I could tell it was successful. I was like, oh, I could see Josh discovering this movie and going, holy shit, that came into my head.
I mean, it's like when you told me about Butt Boy.
Oh yeah, Butt Boy, yeah, which is actually pretty good, like pretty good movie.
It's got its moments.
Yeah, it's got a pretty thing, you know.
I had COVID during the premiere, so I didn't get to come. And so I ended up just watching it, you know, by myself on my bed on Shudder. Mm-hmm. And it still worked, like totally.
Oh, good.
It was still me cracking up by myself. So don't think it needs a theatrical crowd.
Okay, good. Yeah. And to explain the Butt Boy reference, I think Elric had texted me, or just, you know, we were like, oh, I saw this movie and I think you'd like it. And I was like, whenever people do that, like, there's part of me that gets like really like kind of upset that I'm like, man, why do people think I'm such a weird? And then I watch it and I'm like, oh, this is the best movie ever.
Well, it was you had actually pitched this movie to me, Destroy All Neighbors, like, what was it, like 7 years ago? We're in a pool with our kids, and I remember going, okay, that's impossible to make in my head. I didn't tell you that. I was like, man, that's great, Josh. Go get him, buddy. And in my brain, I'm like, he's fucked. I got to stop hanging out with him. I need more successful friends. Hey, anyway. And then, but then I remember going home and watching this Butt Boy thing that I wouldn't normally push play on, but I'd seen a couple good reviews push play, and it was super indie. And again, it was the kind of thing, if you just read the pitch, you'd go, no one could ever make that. But here's the movie. Right. And then you go, wait, you did it. Or Chompy and the Girls that we watched recently.
Chompy and the Girls.
Kind of vibe.
I don't know that movie.
You'll like that. That's like no budget, Chompy and the Girls. Check it out. Like,
it's so fun.
Concept, but like minimal execution, really fun. But I just think it's the fact that you got your voice, the fact that you can work with so many artistic people, so many interesting, funny people, big comedians, but still come away with something that feels like your voice. To me, that's why this is a success. It's a really cool movie.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Still at the top. Your number one horror movie of the year on my Letterboxd list right now. There's only 3 other movies on the list, but that's okay. Because you're number one.
Let's just end this year right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Right now, you stay. You're in pole position. Go with it.
I'm at the top. Yeah.
Well, thanks for not hating us after we deleted your last
and coming
episode.
back. Yeah, we
of course,
didn't
anytime.
The last episode.
Yeah.
Shit happens. So
does.
yeah. But amazing. Congrats, Josh. We can't. Well, wait. Are you working on music videos? So we didn't even mention that. So Josh is like a music video and commercial director by trade, and you've done like major, like nominated for VMAs. Big commercials. So So what are you on right now?
I'm pitching on something. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm pitching on something that should be really fun. It's a commercial.
Nice.
And then I have that Gallagher documentary we're gonna finish it this year. I promise.
That thing's been going for like 6 years too. So I need
at least
Gallagher doc.
And then I don't know. I mean, there's a handful of other scripts. You know, sewer babies. There's always sewer babies.
You've always, when he has come in to talk to my class, he has told us about sewer babies, and I always have a couple of students that blush, and then a few that are like, "I'd fucking watch that," and I'm like, that's how Josh is.
Yeah, there's sewer babies. I don't know. I got too much. I got a lot of weird ideas, but but it's nice because now I have like a proof of concept. Like, look, I can.
Well, it also takes that monkey off your back that sometimes, you know, when you haven't done the thing that feels like you, now you have.
Yeah.
And so you know it's possible, and you're not just climbing Mount Everest now. You know, you kind of have
and it's nice to feel, because I feel like I've been in the horror community and I have done tons of horror adjacent things, but it's nice, and I guess I did Contracted too, so there's that movie. But I don't know. I feel like with this movie, it's the first time that I can. I don't know. I feel like I'm part of the club now or something. Like I feel like I'm now allowed at the party. Even though it's probably already allowed.
I think
we might still delete this episode.
Okay.
We'll see how we're
just
feeling.
To really eliminate that.
Well, you can all see Destroy All Neighbors on Shudder right now. And is it still running theatricals this week?
No, there is. I don't know if I can. I'll just say it. I think we're going to do a Vidiot screening.
Oh, cool.
A screening at the Vidiot Theater at the end of February.
Great.
Nice. And are you doing a physical media release anytime, or is that one?
I mean, we have to. And there's also, the soundtrack is the soundtrack is on Sub Pop Records,
nice.
And it's available on Spotify. And there's also talks about doing like a really nice vinyl with a company that is known for their collectible vinyl for movies. So we'll leave it at that. But yeah, and we're talking to a guy about toys maybe, but we'll see. One step at a time.
Yeah,
fun stuff.
Mass
oh my
Empire.
gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on again.
Yeah.
And yeah, always fun. Thanks, Josh.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you feel like you need some more of us during the off week, you can always head over to our Patreon show, Deep Cuts, where we put our really, really, really weird stuff. Or this week, or last week, we put all of our like really odd Giallos that we found, some strange, crazy stuff that we'd never seen before ended up over there. So definitely head over to our Patreon, Deep Cuts, and check us out there. Otherwise, we will be back in 2 weeks with another exciting guest. Thank you guys so much for listening.
The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah, McKendry, and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.